Okay. Hi, Vanessa. I'm really happy to have you here.
No, thanks, Gail. Very
Thanks so
happy to
much.
be here.
Oh, I've been looking forward to talking to you. So, in the introduction, I've already mentioned that you are a parenting coach and a speaker and a writer on various mental health issues. And um, I guess besides being the founder of a Block Party USA, obviously, we're going to talk about that. What brought you to the field of mental health? I mean, it seems like your most of your your life is wrapped around that topic. So,
Mhm.
can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And health is mental health. So without, just starting, it's so important. But yes, I always
Mm.
had an interest. I actually have an undergrad degree in psychology from Boston University. So I was interested in psychology and well-being. Even when I was younger. But basically,
Mm.
my life journey with I was just always interested in what makes people tick,
Mm.
how people show up differently, and then with my own family's mental health struggles. I have three girls, and mental health struggles in the family, and really whew, it was a deep dive in learning and learning how to cope and understanding stigma, lack of resources, just the years of, quite frankly, hell in trying to support
Mm.
a child and the family.
Mm.
And through that, learning how it's so important to know you're not alone. And I found NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, which I had said to a friend, I need something like Al Anon, but for mental health. And thankfully, she knew about NAMI. And so I first got
Mm.
support with that. And then actually, it's 10 years this month. I've been running a support group for parents of kids with mental health issues under the age of 21. And then just through my own experience, um, the pain to purpose experience, right? Like, how can I help others speaking out about mental health? I became in my town a local resource for activism and information.
Mm.
And from there, I became a parent coach. It was just a natural follow-up because I learned how even when our children are struggling, the important role that parents play. We feel powerless,
Mm.
but we're actually quite powerful. We spend most of the day with our children. Therapy is wonderful, so important, but it's 1 hour a week. And
Yes.
so how a parent sees a child, the environment, I could go on and on about this. So
Mhm.
that's
Mm.
really, and then just realizing how, starting with how kids are doing, but if parents aren't okay, their children can't be okay. So
Exactly.
the next step of like parents' well-being, because parents are burnt out and overwhelmed and stretched thin, and
Mm.
it affects the entire family.
It
So
does.
really mental health as a whole.
Hmm. Well, I should have you back to talk about your solely about your Thrive with the Guide and your work with parents because I just could not agree more with you. I mean, my work in community schools, which, that's kind of its own episode as well, but basically that idea that, the kids are more ready and able to learn when they're coming with
Mhm.
their needs met and they feel they belong and it's because their family is healthy and thriving. And so community schools, work on not just the curriculum and the kids, they still have that in the center, but working on the idea of getting the family so that their needs are met. They have the resources they need, that, things are more equitable. And so, I mean, I totally am with you there. And it makes me think of the book that I used a lot in my thesis was Hold On to Your Kids. Do you know that book by
Mhm.
Gordon
Yeah,
Littell?
that was one. Yeah, read that.
Oh,
Oh gosh, a long time ago.
yeah,
Probably
it
20
just
years
was,
ago. Yeah.
yeah, it's something that I've recommended to parents so many
Mhm.
times.
Mhm.
How parents can matter more than peers, right? I think that's the
Yeah, the message.
tagline there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm with you. And I know you and I are big fans of the Surgeon General's, the former U.S. Surgeon General, and his declaration of the epidemic of loneliness in the U.S. and I'm sure all of North America, probably more places than that. And I just wondered before we talk about Block Party USA, Like, what are you maybe just talk a minute about what you're noticing? Like, in when you talk to kids and families, are you noticing things are getting worse, or do you find there's one or two issues that are really, really coming up a lot for you in your work?
I think I definitely think in the last 10 years things have gotten worse.
Yeah.
I think families are I call families and their homes like little silos of hell. Like
Mhm.
because they're separate, like we don't understand that other people are going through the same thing that we're
Yes.
going through,
Yeah.
but we are so worried about appearance, how we're presenting, achievement, the achievement culture of, and independence and
Yes.
uh, that, well, the pace of life, I think is a huge factor.
Mhm.
Um, what we're expecting ourselves to do is really not humanly possible, and it's evident.
Mhm.
And then the role that technology plays in reducing face-to-face time and connection.
Mhm.
And so, people can be lonely, are often lonely, I will say, in their own
Mm.
homes, right?
Yes.
And like you're saying, like that community of home, of belonging is the foundation. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm passionate about, right? I say like the community within your home and outside of your home.
Mhm.
So
Yes, totally. And I wonder too, I don't know, I know in our neighborhood and in the schools that I worked in the Lower Mainland here, um, like poverty is a huge and the expenses that families are dealing with. And the, both parents are working full time, sometimes two jobs,
definitely. Yes.
and kids, some of the kids are unsupervised and it's not the parents' fault at all. They're trying to make ends meet. And so, oh, it's really a
No,
tough
I
situation.
definitely, yeah, it's that pace of life piece, right? With both
Yeah.
working and then expectations, and it's really there's just a lot of stress. There's a
Hmm.
considerable amount of stress.
Yeah. And for, I don't know about you, and I know you moved a lot too in your life, which is another thing I'd love to talk to you about if we have time. But, um, the idea that I don't know, just, they're exhausted and we had, I'm assuming you, but for me, lots of resources that, I'm someone who has a lot of resources, a lot of privilege. And, I think of how tired and exhausted I was with three kids like you have. And then you think of someone like a newcomer family or something and they don't have those resources, and it's very difficult. So,
Mhm. Yeah,
yeah.
it makes sense why people are struggling, right?
It
It's like,
does. It
yeah.
does. So let's turn to Block Party USA.
Mhm.
So let's hear how it started. How did it come about? And I think, if I'm right about my timeline, you started this before the Surgeon General's report even came out, right?
I did. Well,
Mhm.
I started block parties in my town, the Block Party Initiative in 2018 is when I
2018.
started. And
Yeah.
it was a two-pronged goal to create opportunities for face-to-face connection, and also to provide neighborhood free play for kids to
Mhm.
encourage that possibility. So that was in 2018. And we launched the way we did it. We have 2 weekends, one bookending the summer. So one beginning of June and one in September. And the whole point is to have micro local block
Mhm.
party. So it's not a big town-wide block party.
Right.
It is in your neighborhood, 20 to 30 residences to start. And so that first weekend we had where we were really keeping track of everything. We had about 40 block parties with 1,200 people participating.
Wow.
And
So why did you pick the block party why did this even come about? Like, how did you get this idea?
to have well, I had having moved so many times in my life,
Hmm.
28 times and 8 states and 4 countries. And um, it was always about trying to fit in and belong and be part of something, right? I was always the new kid or the new family, as we moved with our kids. And As a child, I remember how much neighbors played a role in that. Like I tell that
Mhm.
they're in Michigan when we moved there, neighbor Mrs. Fisher came over with a pie and
Mhm.
welcomed us. We had the sidewalk, playing all up and down the street. The
Yeah.
neighbors were really like your home. And then where really we had block parties was in St. Louis, when I was 9, and it was a dead end road, and just it was so much joy for us
Mhm.
kids running around, mixed age play,
Mhm.
our
Mhm.
parents having fun together. And it was really like the iconic American experience, chasing fireflies, playing flashlight tag, swimming in the animal trough that someone had filled with water for us to play in. And the joy, the belonging that was felt was really powerful. And the story I tell is when I had a brother that was born who died 3 days later. And when my parents came home from the hospital, red-eyed, empty-handed, and I remember the wood paneled station wagon pulling in the driveway. And I ran to my neighbor's house, to Mrs.
Mhm.
Gilliam, who held me on her lap and rocked me and told me about how my brother was in heaven with cherubs, and comforted me
Mhm.
at a time where my parents didn't have that in them. They weren't
Right.
capable. And it's such a gift to our kids to have other adults in their lives who
Yeah.
they can literally run to, like I
Mhm.
in a time of need. And in town, what happened, so that's like the history. And had when we lived in Utah, we would have block parties, and it was just that feeling as a perpetual mover, of community,
Yeah.
of belonging, was so powerful. And so in our town in 2016, we had there was a rise in incivility on Facebook, a lot of vitriol. There was a legislator who talked about how she was receiving, horrible emails from constituents on Facebook messages, but when she met them in real life, they were lovely people. She had
Mm.
an entirely different
Mhm.
experience.
Mhm.
And so I just kept thinking, like, how do we have opportunities for face-to-face connection? How do we create these opportunities? And I had lived here for 3 years at the time and had wanted to meet my neighbors,
Mhm.
but wasn't really sure about how to reach out. We'd met a couple of them. I had dogs, so walking the dog, you meet, but it's just a hello. And so it's something I had wanted to do. So we started planning it in 2017. I had founded a free play task force,
Mhm.
to try to get kids to have more free play, helping explain the importance of play in children. We have a very scheduled, resume, checklisted childhood
Mhm.
type of environment. And really feeling that we had moved here from abroad and just had really felt the difference moving here, how scheduled every kid
Yes.
was. And it was so
Mhm.
hard to get play dates.
Mhm.
And also in my work, seeing how the mental health of children was declining at younger and younger ages
Mhm.
and higher rates, realizing like this is not a middle school, high school intervention lab. Like we need to
Yeah.
start younger, help kids with agency of control. So that's how I learned about Peter Gray's work and Let
Yeah.
Grow and Lenore Skenazy. And so really as part of that, developed this free play task force, and block parties were a key to helping kids
Yeah.
meet their neighborhood
Mm.
playmates.
Oh, I love that. Can you talk a bit more about free play and the benefits to kids? Or is that okay if you say a bit
Uh,
more about that?
yeah,
Because
absolutely.
I'm such
I
a
mean,
fan of that. And as a teacher too, and I usually taught in primary grades. So, oh, such an advocate for free play. So, what are the benefits? Can you tell people about some of the
yeah, of
benefits
course.
of that?
Of course. And first of all, your students were so lucky to have you. Um,
Thank you.
and yes, so basically the way childhood is gone, our kids are so controlled. They are told what to do in school.
Yeah.
They're physically monitored. I mean,
Yes.
online they're not, right? Like that's a whole
Yeah. Ironically, right?
they
It's
go
mhm.
unchaperoned through the
Mhm.
world of the internet.
Yeah.
But and physically they're so monitored. And then their after school schedule, like their programs are
Yeah.
all adult led, like a coach telling them what to do,
Yeah.
or, it's like drills, and there is no agency.
Mhm.
And there is nothing, it's, I wrote a piece once, we're raising our kids in captivity and expecting them to survive in the wild because there is no, um, faster way to become depressed and feel
Mhm.
like you don't make a difference in the world than to have
Yeah.
no agency. And
Yes.
also to test their bodies and to find joy. And if we think as adults of our favorite childhood memories,
Mhm.
they are always without adults present on
Mhm.
in the
Yeah.
streets, on the beach, in the woods, right? Like that's
Yes.
and we have such joyful memories, and our kids were robbed of that.
Totally.
In our concern for safety and again, the checklisted
Mhm.
childhood resume.
Oh, so true. And the decision making they do, like as a kindergarten teacher myself, when they're in free play, and then explaining to parents, now people are videotaping things that happen in classrooms and explaining to parents to watch the decisions they make with friends and what to do next and how to share and how to cooperate. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And
Eggs.
even about good classrooms, like good teaching, we always would say, kids need voice and choice.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what you're reminding me of when you're talking about free play. So important. So a block party can not only create connection opportunities, but really importantly, free play for kids. And how about teens? Like, do you find that older kids, they sort of don't want to be involved, but I bet you think they should be involved. What do you think about that?
100%. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's easy. I think we really do ourselves and our kids and our families a disservice by being like, oh, well, they're teens. They don't want it, right? Like
Mhm.
we have this um self-fulfilling prophecy of what a teen should be like and is
Yeah.
like, and
Mhm.
that's a lot of acceptance of them not wanting to do things with us as normal, whereas it's not, it's we need to push back on that. So
Mm.
absolutely, teens to be involved, give them a job, like to carry the cooler down and just hang out,
Mhm.
as being part of it, but just the expectation, like we're doing this as a family,
Family.
our family is going to the block party. And
Mhm.
I can tell you that the teens that I know that is how they have gotten all their jobs, right?
Yeah.
They're pet sitting, dog walking, babysitting, snow shoveling, all of that. And there actually, a woman in town just told me about her daughter has launched, and while she was looking for her full-time job, did all these neighborhood activities, and that's why she is self-sufficient financially. She was able to launch herself because of those neighborhood jobs that she had,
Oh my
as a college graduate
gosh.
even. So yeah,
Oh,
it's
that's so
great.
great.
And that is, I mean, it is so important for our teens, especially all our kids and each of us, but to know that we matter and to know that we have an impact in the world, and we're not the world isn't happening to us. And so having more connections for your teens, like I said, to have other adults to go to,
Yes. Hmm.
but also um, their capability, right? Like I babysit, I walk dog, just all of that. It's
Yeah.
such an opportunity for them. It's so needed, and
Mm.
it's like it's not as formal, right? It can just
Mhm.
happen organically
Mhm.
in their neighborhood.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what about the intergenerational piece? I would imagine that, this is such a great opportunity for, I always think the intergenerational connections, they're rare nowadays because we don't gather as much. And, you think of a wedding, like I always think a wedding is the chance that we get to all be together, all different ages, and, maybe dance together or something. But so this to me seems like a wonderful way. Well, I know it is because I've had I didn't call it a block party, but times here where we had, grandparents coming down and meeting them for the first time. But what do you think about that piece, that intergenerational
Are
connection?
100% right. And that is again, like the block party is such a simple and unique opportunity that
Yeah.
fills so many voids. And
Yes.
exactly what you're saying, it is that intergenerational, we don't have those opportunities. And so it is such a unique cross section, if you will,
Mhm.
of a community that it is it offers those opportunities. For instance, in ours, we our one neighbor Ray, he's 90, and
Mhm.
last year my one of my favorite images was him playing cornhole with one of our youngest neighbors who's 4, and they were playing
Yeah.
it back and forth, and him telling the story like he's lived here. We actually had it on the name badge, and I don't remember how long, like how
Mhm.
long. Name tags are a key part of block party.
Yes, I want to ask you about name tags too.
It was like how long you had lived here. So I don't know how long, maybe 50 years, I'll say. And he was telling stories about how Paul Newman used
Ah!
to be in our road, and there's like a house, and he would hang out in there, and they're like, who's that guy? He's a racer, you know. So anyway, just
Oh.
the story of your road and the streets there. So
Mhm.
you have that experience. And then just the perspective and wisdom that he
Yeah.
has.
Yeah.
I mean, he's taught me a few things too.
I bet. Oh,
Yeah.
lovely. So what's the state of Block Party USA now? Like, so you started with one in your own neighborhood, and then how has it grown? And for people that don't know much about it, like where does it stand now?
Yeah, so in I launched officially. So when I did it just for my town, then other nearby towns heard about it. They wanted to know more, and I was realizing people really had an interest in this. And so I launched Block Party USA in 2023 for a national movement or
Mm.
continental movement. It doesn't,
Yeah.
however it is. But we have people signed up from 45 states and
What?
the District of Columbia. And it is really my mission is just to make it easy for people to make this happen
Hmm.
because people they want to meet their neighbors. They just
Yeah.
feel awkward. They don't know how to go about it. They
Mhm.
feel like the weirdo that, after 7 years, I'm going to ask you to,
Yeah.
they it's just it's reintroducing this idea that used to be just a part of our lives.
Mhm.
And there's no money to be right. It's not like a business where, there's no one is out there, trying to sell block parties. So it's
Right.
something that just went by the wayside culturally.
Mhm.
I will say there are some communities that are still having block parties, but Block Party USA mission is really just to make it to remind people of this idea because it's fallen off of their radar, and then to help people make it happen.
So, and you have there's a website, right? And you
Yeah.
have some resources on there. So tell people what's on the website.
Yeah. So the website has a lot of, answers questions that you may have, addresses concerns that people may have. A lot of one of his, people are like, well, what if no one shows up?
Yeah.
Or what if, it is that nervousness that people or how many very practically how many people should I invite, how do I, right? And so it helps address some of those. I have a guide on there,
Mm-hmm.
how to block party, a step-by-step guide which goes over, who to invite, how to invite, do you need to get a permit, some suggestions for food, games for kids. That's the overarching message that I want to make sure people get is that this is to be kept simple.
Yeah.
This is not a bouncy house um, and playing, right? Like big affair. It is to keep
Yeah.
it simple so it's sustainable. Um,
Yes.
so we've got the guide on there, which will walk you through everything. And then I also have a graphic on there, which I love, which is called the Block Party Ripple Effect
Mm.
because you don't really like, oh, great, it's a nice afternoon with neighbors, but it's actually so much more than that. Your neighbors are your first responders, right? We don't in an emergency.
Yes.
They're the people that are right there. That's the story of Dick Van Dyke getting carried out during the fires by a neighbor,
Yes.
right? Like those are the people that are, and especially with all of our increased weather events and natural disasters, it's really an important thing to know your neighbors now.
Yeah.
Um, Anything from book clubs to meal trains to the jobs for kids I talked about, just a sense
Mhm.
of grounding. And so there's a really big ripple effect to that,
Mhm.
and it has it on there.
Yeah, that's great to know. And I was going to ask you about, any stories that you might have about long-lasting effects from the block parties. I don't know if anything comes to mind, but yeah, that idea that it's not just that one event that you're creating. Well, you already mentioned even some of the kids, who've gotten, jobs from that. And I know that the caring adult, the statistics around even one extra caring adult in a child's life for teachers, for teaching, there's a huge correlation between having that extra caring adult and success in school and
Oh, interesting.
graduating. So, I mean, there are a lot of other things, but that's something that educators often talk about. So in a block party situation, you're possibly creating many, many connections for your kids, like the village, right? We need that
Exactly.
village.
And for yourself, for your kids and for yourself,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because again, this is about what are we role modeling as parents? What kind of like
Yeah.
are we living a life worth living that your kids are looking, or are you so maxed out, so stressed out, so, and then children looking like, oh, I don't know if is this what the future means for
Yes,
me? So it's
exactly.
important that parents, one of the other advisories that Vivek Murthy gave was about parental well-being.
Yes.
Parents are not okay. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, obviously, I look at this through the parent child lens. That's my
Yeah.
right. But there are people who aren't parents that are, in the communities too, or they are grandparents as well.
Yeah.
And to have these connections for parents, to have someone that
Hmm.
they can rely on,
Yeah.
this is right when we moved here. So it must have been before we had block parties. It must have been 2014 when this happened. I was speaking at a 9/11 event, and I had to get my daughter on the bus,
Mm.
to be able to get there 40 minutes away and on time. And it was a crazy morning because I had to get myself ready, emotional, all that stuff. And we go to the end of the driveway, and I realized she missed the bus.
Oh,
And I don't have time to drive her. I
yes.
don't, and I almost start crying. And there's a woman, a neighbor, I'd seen her before, walking her
Mhm.
dog.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Are you okay?" And I told her, and she said, "I'll drive her to school."
Oh,
And like just little tiny
little
moments
things.
like that. And she drove her to
Hmm.
school, and I'll never forget it. And she's
Yeah.
a good neighbor, right?
Yeah.
And but your neighbors have such can play such a vital role in your life.
Yeah.
And there's just so many stories. That's like a short-term story, but so many
Hmm.
stories of just general feeling like you belong and having community.
Yeah.
And and that is a cornerstone of human happiness, right?
It
The connection
is.
and
Absolutely. Well, and I noticed in the U.S. Chamber of Connection, there are six points of essential elements we need to prevent loneliness. And one of them is having an emergency contact in your neighborhood, something as simple as that. And something I noticed recently on something I was writing that, I've written about how in my new neighborhood here, we moved about a year ago, and I hadn't met many people, so I had a little block party. But what I was thinking about is that in our neighborhood, there are no front yards. There are no front yards and there are no porches. And so, we have our backyards, which I'm so grateful for. But where I used to meet people in my other neighborhood was in the front yard while I'm gardening and people are walking by and or they're walking their dog by. And in the some of the neighborhoods now, for space reasons or whatever, there isn't that common
yes.
place. So a block party is almost needed to have a venue for making these connections.
Exactly. Yeah, the physical environment has changed so much that it's
Yes,
not we can't make those connections anymore that we used to be able to make.
exactly. Yeah.
There's Strong Towns has a great video on block parties actually. The And one of the things they talk about is cars, like how they change the landscape of it,
Mm-hmm.
the prevalence of cars, right? That you just
Mm-hmm.
couldn't just walk across the street as easily.
Yeah.
So those are really no front porches and no front yards are really, and for us, many of our houses are like you can't even see your neighbor. You're
Mm-hmm.
so far apart.
Right.
So
That's true
we have
too.
really long driveways. So it's
Yeah,
just there isn't a natural, you have to be really intentional
you do.
about making this happen.
That's the word. Exactly. So what would you say like the several key main things that people should have or would be most helpful to have at a block party? Should they do a simple block party for their neighborhood? What are the main things?
Um, I think just remembering to keep it simple, like it
Hmm.
just mantra over and over again, because I think it
Yes.
can be really paralyzing to feel
Yes.
like there's a right way to do it. And
Right.
there isn't. It is just about bringing people together and putting that in that somebody is waiting for you to do it. Somebody needs you to do it. And so be the person, be the well-being catalyst, right? That your
Mhm. Right.
family, your neighborhood, our I would say our country needs, and make a commitment to it. Find if you know another neighbor, ask them to help you with it. If not, go for it. Get a date that will work, maybe not next week, maybe a couple weeks out.
Yeah.
I find that Sunday evenings are the best time for, there's so many with sports and weekend
Yeah.
activity, it's a lot. So
Hmm.
we do like a Sunday from 4 to 7
Hmm.
time, but just do one that works for you
Hmm.
if you're the one organizing it. Send out very simple invites. You can
Hmm.
do it if you have a child, have them write it out, right? Have them get involved in it, or type it up and put it in someone's front door or
Yeah.
in their mailbox, and invite, put your contact information and all that stuff and when and where and put some tables out, but invite people to bring something to share.
Yeah. Hmm.
Right? It is not, you're not hosting a block party, you're organizing one.
Right.
So really, and people want to do something, and maybe
Yes.
you say on there, store-bought or homemade, doesn't matter. Because again,
Yes.
people are so worried, like, well, I didn't have time to make anything. I don't know if we should go. It doesn't,
Yes.
it doesn't matter. So, um, but name tags are the
Hmm.
must.
Yeah.
Um, and a sign-in sheet with like contact lists so
Hmm.
that you can be connected, create a neighborhood group chat, or have someone to contact in an emergency or when you need a babysitter, that type of stuff to help strengthen
Hmm.
those connections.
Hmm.
And then just some simple games for kids, bubbles, hula hoops, chalk. Like I said, we had cornhole.
Yeah.
Someone last year brought a Jenga, like an outside
Yeah.
big Jenga,
Right.
but it was really keeping it simple,
Yeah.
so that it is sustainable. And yeah, that's it. Some music would be fun if you can.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh, it's so simple and so powerful. It can do so many things at once. I hope more people try it. And do they have to register to do it on your website or
Oh,
anything?
no, they don't have, I'm doing a summer challenge. So if people could register for that, that would be
Hmm.
great. But they don't have to register, but you can sign up to get my newsletter and get more information and then and sign up for the challenge because it's really great for me to share. It
Yeah.
inspires other people
Hmm.
everybody learns from each other and they learn that it's doable and it's possible.
That's great. Yeah. So please do that if you're planning to do a block party, everybody. And so what about your own mental health, Vanessa? Like maybe you're an expert on this and you're dedicating so much of your life to everyone else's mental health. So you're a busy mom and a busy working person. Like what are you doing for your mental health?
Yeah. I love that you asked that. I don't think I've ever been asked that.
Really?
Yeah, really, I don't think I have. And I think a lot about that uh, in terms of It's a unique thing. So a lot of people, when I was running a nonprofit here in town, the Wilton Youth Council, when
Mhm.
our family was going through our biggest crisis with mental health with my daughters, and people would say after the fact they didn't know what was going on, unless they knew me well, they would say, "How do you do it?" Or "How did you do it at the same time?" Or if people knew what was going on, they're like, "Oh, you should quit that too." But
Mhm.
honestly, I get my energy, my well-being because of, when someone says, "You were the light in the darkness," right? That helped me through. There is nothing
Mhm.
more powerful and more meaningful and um, healthy for me
Yeah.
than to have that. So it's also, it was also helping others when I felt powerless in my own situation, right? And
Yeah. Mhm.
that's been part
Mhm.
of my journey. But also with this work that I'm doing now, where I am now, is I'm surrounded by other people like you who are
Mhm.
doing such wonderful, good things. And so my experience, like I'd say as a whole, our nation is really struggling right
Mhm.
now. A lot of people are struggling with
Mhm.
their mental well-being. And I don't have that experience because I am surrounded by other people. Like what we both say, which we've
Yeah.
learned,
Yes.
um, is fascinating. What we pay attention to is what we see.
Yes.
And so the world that I'm in are so many wonderful people working so hard to make the world a better place. And it's so uplifting
Mhm.
and energizing and so positively powerful. Um,
Mhm.
that with that, it sustains me. I've shared with you I've had a lot of loss and health challenges these last 7 months, and
Mhm.
um, the work that I do, I think, has been a key piece of helping me manage all of that,
Mhm.
and using that, pain into purpose uh,
Yes.
strategy, which I've always
Mhm.
used. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for asking.
Oh, you're welcome. Do you have any like besides your work? And I understand what you mean because the surrounding oneself in these good
Mm,
vibes. I mean, it's like I always say, the good is out there. It's
yeah,
because those good news stories are like tucked at the bottom of the newscast for the last, 30 seconds, and that's it.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
we know in this kind of a field that there's all kinds of amazing stuff. So if we can surround ourselves with more of that, but say if someone is on their own or a little bit isolated. Like
Mhm.
for you, do you have physical things you do for your
Oh,
well-being?
100%. So yes, 100%. So I walk every day
Mm-hmm.
outside. So I have the nature piece. I have the bilateral stimulation, as you call,
Yes.
with the walking, which
Yeah.
helps you regulate. And I Our connections are really the most, right? Our
Yes.
relationships, so with my family, with my husband,
Yeah.
right? Making sure that which is a constant, a concerted effort in terms of relationship over task,
Mm-hmm.
um, because
Mm-hmm.
we're such a task-driven society. So it's really a daily reminder on that. But one of the special things that I do every week is it's having moved all over the place. It is
Mm-hmm.
unbelievable that my best friend from high school lives in the same town as I do.
Oh my God.
And so we realized last night she had her birthday. We had celebrated. I had been able to wish her birthday for 39 years. Like
Oh,
we've known each other. And the fact that she lives in my town. So we have a commitment every Friday that we're going to see each other in some way.
oh,
And
lovely. Mm-hmm.
so that is super grounding and
Mm-hmm.
a very obviously long-standing friendship, and
Mm-hmm.
but it's a priority for us. And if for
Yeah.
some reason we can't, we'll make another, we'll find another
Yeah.
day that it's gonna work.
Yeah.
But those relationships and
Yeah.
that connection is really, really important.
Most important thing, isn't it? So, okay, we talked about where people can get information about the block parties. And what about your, we're just about ready to talk about the quote, but
Yeah.
what about your parenting resources? Like, do you have a website for that people
Uh-huh.
can get
Yep.
information from? Yeah.
Yes, it is currently, I'm in the throes of updating it. So I feel like it's maybe by the time this podcast is out,
Okay.
it'll be the
Yeah.
new one. But it's you can go to vanessaelias.com.
Okay.
So my full name or Thrive with a Guide is my business name.com.
Okay.
Both of those work for the website. But that has my parent coaching on there. I do private sessions. I also do speaking engagements for that as well. Um,
Mhm. Okay.
and that's the best spot to go. I have, Facebook, Instagram,
Mm.
LinkedIn, all those usuals.
Okay. Great. So, is there anything else that you wanted to say about the block parties or this topic before we go on to the quote that I didn't
No,
ask you?
I think just the message is that you can do it and I'm here to help.
Okay, great. Okay. To my guests and have them comment on it in any way they wish. And so I have one here from David Brooks, and this is the quote. If you ask people at the end of their lives what made them happy, it was not self sufficiency. It was the moments when they were utterly dependent on somebody else, and somebody else was utterly dependent on them.
Um, that's a beautiful quote, and I think it has to do most with vulnerability and allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and love and safety, right? Allowing yourself to be vulnerable and have someone make it a safe space for you and
Mhm.
take care of you and respond to you in any way that you need is the most intimate. um Vulnerable is the word I just keep thinking of, because you are
Mhm.
so vulnerable to be so dependent on someone, and
Right.
you also know how much you matter to someone. And then when
Mhm.
you're on the other end, when someone is dependent on you,
Mhm.
it is showing how important you are and how much you matter in having
Right.
that be a safe space for that's not fair.
My dog just came into the frame of the
That's
oh my gosh,
adorable.
having this.
So so I think those are just such those two examples are, we are humans. We are meant to be interdependent by design. We cannot survive on our own.
No.
And the most meaningful moments in our lives are when we are vulnerable and
Mhm.
respond to someone who is vulnerable in a
Mhm.
way, in making a difference in their lives by taking care of them or allowing someone to take care of us.
Mhm. Love that. Thank you. And it all so and then that we always finish with the last two questions. So the first one is about what you've mentioned already and what I talk about every single episode is about what we focus on grows. And so with the understanding that what we shine light on grows, if we imagine a world in which we were to all focus more on fostering love, such as in the ways we focused on here today, what do you think we might see?
I ultimately think um, that we would experience a unity similar than we did post 9/11.
Mhm.
That the way we came together, our recognition of our common humanity and our love for one another and our caring and um, support, no matter where we differ
Yeah.
um, on things, that's ultimately what I think will happen. Because when we see each other
Mhm.
face to face, right, with the block parties, I'm thinking,
Yes.
when we
Yes.
really see each other, then we understand that we are human and that is our biggest connection.
Mm.
And we're in this together.
Thank you. Beautiful. And the last question is always, what are one or two thoughts you hope listeners take away from our conversation today?
Um, well, I think that one person can make a difference for people to really understand that they have the power to make a difference
Mm-hmm.
for their own lives, their family, their neighborhood, and that the specific to block parties, that they're a free, simple, and actionable cure for our country's loneliness, social isolation, divisiveness, and the youth mental health crisis. And there is no time like now for
Mm-hmm.
them to organize a block party.
Oh, yay. I could not agree more. Oh, thank you so much, Vanessa. It's been so nice talking to you.
Thank you so much for
And
having me and the work
yeah,
you do.
thank you.